First and foremost, I would like to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakakodash, which is the paleo way of saying all praises to the Heavenly Father, whom this world ignorantly calls God, in the name of Yahweh Shai, in the Holy Spirit, the Spirit Holy. Double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone, who rule well and speak this truth to the four corners of the earth in sincerity, preaching on the highways and byways to you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans who the Bible refers to as Israelites. You know, you are indeed the Israelites, right? Scattered, dispersed, diaspora to the four corners, four winds of the earth. You understand? And may look like the other nations, but are indeed Israelites, going back to the line of Jacob, aka Israel, the 12 patriarchs, making up the tribal makeup of the house of the Lord, house of David, the house of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. Shalom to you. All right, so this is going to be covering global debt and the financial situation through the lens of prophecy. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this going so you can listen to it. All right, follow along.
Excellent. Let's connect the dots between global debt, digital finance, and prophetic patterns, especially through the lens of biblical justice and spiritual discernment. Okay, global debt is built on sand. The current global financial system is built on fiat currency and fractional reserve banking, meaning governments and banks create money by issuing debt. As of 2025, global debt exceeds $300 trillion, a figure that dwarfs actual productive output. This system rewards speculation, not labor or stewardship, enslaves nations through interest-bearing loans and austerity, violates biblical principles of jubilee, debt forgiveness, and honest weights and measures. Leviticus 25, Proverbs 11:1.
All right, so we're gonna get those. Couple precepts right there. All right, here we are in Leviticus 25. I'm beginning at verse 35. And if thy brother be waxing poor, right, means if he becomes poor and fallen in decay with thee, right, then thou shalt receive him. Well, thou shalt relieve him, right? Yea, though he be a stranger or a sojourner, that he may live with thee. All right. So, you know, though he be a stranger, that's a good point to make. You know, though he be a stranger, he's still your brother, right? He's still an Israelite. He's still a Hebrew, right? Though he be a stranger or a sojourner, that he may live with thee, right? So, you know, let him live with you, right? You know, in peace, basically. It says, take thou no usury of him, right? That means charging interest. Take thou no usury of him or increase, all right? But fear thy power, right? That thy brother may live with thee, you know? Alongside his brother. You understand? So verse 37 says, thou shalt not give him thy money upon usury, nor lend him thy victuals for increase, you know, nor lend him thy food for increase. All right. I am the Lord your power, which brought you forth out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan and to be your power. You know, so it goes into not lending, you know, no usury, you know, so that you may dwell in peace, right? You won't have a dispute, and that brother is more easily able to pay you back. So yeah, the United States, you know, and other places abroad charge usury and interest, man, and in most cases excessive interest. You know, we see how that's going. All right, so we also got Proverbs chapter 11, verse 1. Let's get that. All right, here we are in Proverbs 11, verse 1. A false balance is abomination to the Lord our power, but a just weight is his delight. You know, when pride cometh, then cometh shame. All right, but with the lowly is wisdom. Right. All right, so let's break that down. All right. A false balance is not a true balance, right? It's not even. It's not measured correctly. When you have a false measurement, you know, Yahweh, he don't like that, man. It's an abomination, man. let's get into the word abomination, man. All right, so I'm using Adam line. All right, it says abominable thing or action, feeling of disgust. All right, hatred, loathing, disgust. You know, yeah, man. The Lord is disgusted. You know, at usury, man. You know, he's just disgusted at it. But meaning, if it ain't right, it ain't right, man. If it ain't just, it's not gonna work, man. You know, a just weight is his delight. He's happy when things are righteous, man. When things are good. He's not happy when things are not right. All right, and it says, for the love of money is the root of all evil, right? The love of the money is the root of all evil, right? So, a person love money, that's an indicator of greed, man. And greed is thinking yourself more than what you actually are, and that's where pride comes in, right? And it says, when pride cometh, then cometh shame. You know, all right. Shame is when somebody don't feel right. You know, shame is like is a uncomfortable feeling, man. If somebody talk bad about you, you're gonna feel shame, right? And that shame comes because the person that dealt with you, that had pride in their heart, had a haughty spirit, was dealing with you in an unfair manner, which is an abomination to the Lord, the most high power, man. All right, but with the lowly is wisdom, right? So the lowly are the people who don't have pride. Those people who are saying, well, let me listen and learn, and continue to listen and learn, right? Because remember, the student is not greater than his teacher, right? Nor is the servant greater than his master, right? The master was once the worker, right? The worker, over time gains experience to become the master, just like the student. Just like a teacher. A teacher at one point, and for varying degrees, was a student and learning the ways to teach, and takes pleasure in teaching, and that is a good thing. That is a righteous thing. So we do this. Everything that we do is supposed to be done in decency and in order. But where you got pride that comes in, that's of the evil one, man. That's wickedness. You know, that's why we see the national debt. Actually, what it said is the global debt over $300 trillion, right? A false balance. It's an abomination to the Lord because it causes stress. It causes the people to mourn. It causes the people to be unsure of their existence. Some people off themselves behind debt. A lot of bankers get in trouble because of greed. How many times have we heard that a banker on a live itself, man, because of debt? Because he got caught cheating the people, right? Through usury, man, charging high interest, because they create the money by issuing debt, which means you go into a financial institution, you ask these people for a loan, and you might not be able to pay it back, and in most cases people can't pay it back. I seen an article, was it yesterday, the day before yesterday, where it was talking about the credit rating of U.S. is going down again. It was a triple A, which is like the best credit rating you can have. And America is at a double A. And it's just it varies in degrees, but as far as United States credit cards usage is concerned, in a general sense, they're saying that people who normally would pay their credit card bills on time are slacking right now. They're letting that debt kind of build up, and that debt is based upon the issuance of that debt, and people not being able to pay it. Why are the people not able to pay it? Because of imbalances in the financial structure. right, which is the governance, the leadership, you know, and they're trying to keep up with the population, you know, which is approaching 8 billion, by countering it with what you would call population control, man. This is why you see, the oligarchs, the technocrats coming up with new and improved methods of population control, man. There's an article that I covered recently about Bill and Melinda Gates, working in Kenya and Nigeria and India, because India has like one of the highest populations per capita. That means among all the nations, they got a very vast amount of people, and they are trying to knock their numbers down because basically people are per the oligarch view or technocrat view, or people like Bill and Melinda Gates, they view people as people who are a strain on the natural resources of the earth, right? So like in agriculture, right? That's where most food staples come from, like grains and your rice and your veggies and your fruits. All of those are agricultural products, right? So they have supply and demand. It's called supply and demand. You have supply and then you have a demand for those supplies, and those agricultural resources are a supply, and you have once the demand outweighs the supply, then you have an imbalance. You understand? So basically production is not keeping up with the need of the people, from their view, and that's by design, you know. But so we see an imbalance because the people are mourning under a misguided and unwise leadership, global leadership at that. So you got different nations, which are different kingdoms, different crowns, you know, and all of them don't get along. You have separate interests among the kingdoms and the nations, and they fight amongst themselves for dominance and control of resources and lands. This is where you get into territorial disputes, because you have these different kingdoms or empires or nations vying for control of land for resources so that they can dictate prices. And when you have these types of conflicts, then you have a global a global unrest, right? It's no longer civil, because it's a dog eat dog situation, and these heathen nations are literally dogs, man, because they'll come with ICBMs, man, and that's what it's coming to, because the conflict is global, and it's based on a spiritual adherence, right? An inspiration for control and dominance, which is greed, which is pride. Okay, they don't want to be seen as the beggar or the person having to borrow, right? So it creates turmoil, and breaks down relationships. For the love of money is the root of all evil. You understand? So let's go back to what chat was saying. But Proverbs, man, Proverbs 11 and 1 and 2, all right? Yeah, it's solid, man. So we just got Leviticus 25 and Proverbs. It says prophetically, this resembles the Babylonian system. See? All right? A structure of economic control, spiritual deception, and exploitation of the poor, right? All right? So it's all about economic control, man. Spiritual deception is at the heart of it all, because for the love of money is the root of all evil, and that's a spiritual thing. Pride is a spiritual thing, just like being lowly is a spiritual thing. Don't think yourself more than what you are. And no man on earth is above that principle. You understand? All right, so it says exploitation of, the poor are being exploited by all of this, because the leaders are in gross darkness spiritually, right? You know, these are principles. This is expressing how dark the world is. You know, it's not a place of light or a place of enlightenment, but it's the total opposite. And the poor are being exploited because they are the most affected, because they are, really the majority, especially Yasharala, so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American communities. They're the most affected, by policy, by legislation, by dictates of wicked, dark rulership, man. You know? So this is why the people are mourning and crying out. And the men of the Lord specifically are crying out to the Father, right? On the highways and hedges and byways, man, to our people, to warn of the coming dangers that lie ahead, right? So we are at the beginning of what is described by the Bible as Jacob's trouble, or the great tribulation. They are both the same thing, and they tell of a time where, whereas we think it's dark now, it's going to get darker, right? But these are warnings, because Yahweh Shai is the spirit of prophecy, right? The spirit of wisdom and knowledge and knowing these things. And these things were written aforetime for our benefit and our learning, right? So we can learn, okay, look, the Most High has set everything up. It's a proverbial chessboard, and the Most High is moving all the pieces. He's pulling all the strings ultimately for his glory, right? Because this is his book, his script. He has written it to perfection, and everything that he has written and spoken from his mouth, which are the prophets, the men of the Lord, the sincere, Akim, Malakwath, right? I should say Malakwathium, right, of the Lord. Those men are set up as the mouthpiece of the Lord, according to Yahweh, why Yahweh Shai's heart. They speak this truth, and they warn of what's to come. Once again, I had to go over that because it's very important to understand. And to understand is to be able to listen, to be able to learn, be able to apply what you hear and what you learn, right? So we look at things through a spiritual lens, All right, so it says here, the rise of central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, and cashless systems is accelerating. These technologies promise convenience, but also enable, right? So under the guise of convenience, this is a spiritual deception, right? So when you see these things and hear these things, know that it's in the spiritual realm, right? These are principalities all set up by Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai to test the elect, test his children, and to ultimately destroy this place, so that a righteous kingdom that is not abominable can be set up, all right, in the foreseeable future. All right, angels don't know the date, the great and terrible day of the Lord, but we know when we see certain signs through prophecy, through the spirit of Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, when those times are upon us, and we seeing some things happen right now. So let's get back to it. Programmable money, right? Governments can restrict how and where funds are spent. Now, if you thought they had control, this is ultimate control of what you can spend and whatnot, right? All right, so you had a debt, say you had a loan, and then you got a cryptocurrency wallet. They can now go in with this programmable money and just snatch it from you. You was expecting to go get some groceries for your loved ones the next day, and boom, you ain't got nothing, because it's programmable money. It's something that's not tangible, right? It's something floating in the air, something invisible. The money's invisible. Yeah, if you can accept that, right? But let me get back. It says surveillance and control, right? Every transaction is traceable. So everything you do, your whole move, like, okay, it's traceable. We can see exactly where you spent the money, how much you spent, and who that money went to. So not only on the receiving end, but on the not only on the giving end, but on the receiving end as well, right? You see? All right. Exclusion. Okay. Now it says This is the part of it that's the biggest one. All of it's big, but it says dissenters or the unvaccinated, for example, could be locked out of the system. And we see a beta test in China right now. They got what they call a social credit scoring system. Social is the practice of, okay, association, community, communism. You see what I'm saying? The Communist Party of China is doing this right now. I've seen videos, and it like TikTok took a video of talking about it's AI generated video of misinformation, disinformation, this and that. And it's not true, but that's actually going on, man. Because the internet is sometimes a place where the truth is often frowned upon, and they will scrub the internet of all relevant information, or the truth, I should say. So it's a censorship. This is basically essentially a censorship. So it says dissenters so a dissenter is a person who may speak ill of the rulership. You understand? That will be called a person that's a dissenter, right? Or a conspiracy theorist, or somebody who's spewing misinformation, allegedly, right? Allegedly, I have to say, right? It says, or the unvaccinated. We know 2020, going back to 2020, you wasn't allowed in certain places unless you had a stamped immunization card. Right? They literally was handing out, if you took all the juice, you had to prove it in order to get into a sports venue or a movie theater or a concert. They was doing that as a test run. Again, it's a beta test. They have to test it before they roll it out full mass. It says, for example, could be locked out of the system. Right. All right. So it says some prophetic interpreters link this to Revelation chapter 13, where it says no one can buy or sell without the mark. Right. The mark is the implantable RFID chip, to see him, if you can accept it, right? And it's not of the Bible, and prophecies are of no private interpretation. It's laid out plain upon the table, easy for you to understand, so that when you read it, you can run. You can run with it, and that means you're not lagging, you're not slow. You caught up mentally and spiritually as to what's going on. That's why the men of the Lord are set up, to make these things clear for you to understand. So we're gonna go over this constantly. We're gonna constantly connect, the scriptures to what we see going on in the world, man. Because this world is made for the many, but the world to come, which is Zion, that the holy kingdom, the heavenly kingdom, is made for the few. Only few be that find the straight and narrow path, man. Because man, look, the world is broad and wide. The road and the path is broad and wide that leadeth unto destruction. And so this is a thing where they trying to affect the whole world. You ain't just gonna be able to be separate, and think you're gonna, as far as the financial system is concerned. But the Most High, Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai, is going to provide the elect of him and his children. The 1/3 of his children scattered to the four corners of the earth shall eat. They will eat. They're going to be covered and taken care of, man. But that takes faith and being able to endure unto the end. And part of enduring unto the end is the preparation, getting your mind and, in gear and preparedness for what's about to happen. So you see these things, you hear these things happening, right? You see them unfolding before your eyes. This is prophecy, literally happening in real time, in our time, right? A lot of people don't, they don't realize, okay, how important these times are and how pivotal they are, which means there's a shift in a change in the way the world is operating, right? But there's nothing new under the sun. Meaning that in a spiritual sense, the things that are happening now and the things to come were written aforetime for our benefit, right? And ultimately for the benefit of the kingdom, right? And the kingdom has to have a king, and our king is Yahweh Shai under Yahweh, which set Yahweh Shai up to be our king and works through Yahweh Shai. And Yahweh Shai, he pretty much owns his men. He created his men for his will and purpose. And if we go outside of that will and purpose, it's a false balance. It's abomination. So the Most High, He's gonna spew you out of His mouth. You know, if you're not bringing out His truth, right, and doing it in sincerity, man. Yeah, you know, it's a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living power, which means to go outside of His ordinance, right? You know, but you got to know also that ordinance does consist of the all of the principles, and some people follow false doctrine. You know, some people follow the true doctrine, and that's the division. Because Yahweh Shai say, you think I come to bring peace, but nay, He said, no, I come to bring division, man. You know, because you got to remember Yahweh, and why Yahweh Shai are indeed separatists, man. It's about the supremacy of Yahweh Shai. It ain't about white supremacy. No. And it's not about black supremacy. No, it's not that, man. You know, even though the original Israelites are so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, they're Israelites who look like the other nations, right? So for anybody saying, oh, black Hebrew Israelite, that's a fallacy, man. That's vanity. That's false. That's not true. But the original ones were brown people, indigenous people, people of Yahweh B'Shem Yahweh Shai, Hebrews, yeah, Israelites. Black, no. we gotta make that determination and distinction, based upon what the scriptures are saying. All right. So let's get back to this. It says you can explore one such prophetic analysis in this article on the Big Reset, right, which discusses how fiat collapse and digital finance may usher in a new global order, right? So the new global order is what is in other words the new world order, right? Which is a new world religion, right? Which is nothing new. I mean, we know it's clearly Satanism, dominance and control with the spirit of pride and arrogancy, right? So that right there is really Satan's system and the beast system, right? It says biblical justice versus financial empire. Scripture calls for debt release every 7 years, and that's in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 15, right? Which is in the law, right? That's in the law, the actual law. America, Babylon the Great, don't even really, at this point, it doesn't even recognize the law of the land, which is the Constitution, right? They don't recognize it. They going against the very foundation of what they report or purport to be the law, right? They made millions of codes and statutes, man. Or I should say tens of thousands of codes and statutes, which are loosely based upon law. It's what they call a rule of law, but it's not the actual law. But the actual law is found, in the books of the law, right? The books of the law in the Bible. You understand? Deuteronomy 15, good example. Debt release every 7 years. All right. Land restoration every 50 years, right? Land restoration, that's very important, and it's a biblical principle, because all authority, all wisdom, all counsel comes from the scriptures, right? Yahweh, why Yahweh Shai, right? Who provided Israelites, right? And with the actual law. So all of these things that you see were set up by Yahweh, by Yahweh Shai, for His people, and the other nations have made adaptations to those laws, right? They were given things that they shouldn't have, like these certain understandings, because our people stiff-necked and foolish, man, So whereas we were at one point the actual ruling class, under Yahweh while Yahweh Shai, but our people kept going off and doing other things, getting too complacent with these other nations, man, and allowing their idols into our perimeters, man, and boundaries, breaking the laws, man. Our people was breaking the laws, man. So he had to bring us back to a lower state, you know, and through the course of time in exiles, multiple exiles and captivities that we was led into, we needed reconciliation, and that's what Yahweh Shai served to do, to be that mediator. So the Most High created Yahweh Shai, you know, and Yahweh Shai was created in the beginning, but came in the form of his kindred, his people, in the form of Yahweh Shai, to be the word. He said, I do what the Father tell me to do, and say what the Father want me to say. That's why he was quoting the law and the prophets. He's the head, man. Yahweh Shai is the head, man, of his people. So we are his people, right? And he made that sacrifice, to reconcile and bring us back to our Father, even in these times. We had another captivity after Yahweh Shai, ascended after he was crucified, man. And in the 60s, Abba Bivens came upon the scene, like Elijah the prophet, man. And he restored unto our people, knowledge of self, knowledge of who we are, man. And it's so important, right? So here we are, 2025, and many are awakening, man, to this truth. And it's a beautiful thing, and it's right on time, man. The harvest is great, but the workers are few. The workers are few. As people hear this word, they some of them accept it. That's the good soil. They accept the word. And they believe on Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai. And knowing the name is important, man. People think, oh no, his name is Jesus. They're going off of indoctrination, man. False teachers. And they may have good intentions, man. But they may not know themselves, and that would be a blind guide, a blind teacher. So we got to look at it like that. It's not, and it does offend, but that offense must come. But if you know that you offending the body of Yahweh Shai, Hamashiach, then correct yourself. It's never too late. If you don't think that you can correct the error in your ways, then you're gonna be destroyed, man. Anyway. So, it's about being humble, man, and being a servant, right? It's about it's in many ways being a student. Before you become a teacher. As I stated earlier, it's about degrees of learning and experience, right? The experience to become a teacher. So my experience, my humble experience, it continues to teach me. I continue to be cut with the sword of the Spirit, because there's some things I still didn't understand that I'm understanding. And Yahweh Shai Ratazah, Lord willing, I continue to learn. I continue to be of a humble and contrite spirit, unto my Father Yahweh, while Yahweh Shai, my Lord, my big brother, So in this thing, you got men of the Lord set up, man, and those are the men that we're supposed to be listening to, and learning from. Everybody needs support and to be ministered to, So ministering to someone is giving aid, man, giving help. You got to be willing to accept that help and also accept correction, man. If you're being corrected in measure, you're gonna be corrected in measure, But if you ain't listening, man, pretty much the prophets of the Lord gonna wipe their feet, man, and not deal with you, man. You can have a prideful spirit about you, man. And that should always be your mindset, to be willing and able to learn and accept correction, though it may hurt. Hey, take your pride out of it, man. Take your ego out of it and accept that correction and move forward in peace with your brethren, man. Because the Most High, Yahweh Shai, He's gonna judge, man. He's gonna judge, and it's gonna be a harsh judgment. You know, we're all given warnings, man. You know, sometimes those a wicked spirit might jump on you, man. You know, you don't know where that's coming from, and I'm gonna tell you, a wicked spirit is a deaf, dumb, and blind spirit, man. You know, it'll blind you to what the light is. And when the men of the Lord are bringing out something, man, look, that's light. You know, and that light is a consuming fire. Remember, fire is light, right? Fire is also a cleansing agent. You know, call halal Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai. I understand that. You know, and can see it. You know, so in this thing, man, go with truth, man. You know, be humble, because that's the best way to be. Because the meek shall inherit the earth, and the earth to come. You know, remember Esau, Edom, the wicked. That's running Babylon the Great. You know, it's given into the hand of the wicked. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked, man. The wicked is Esau. You know who he is. You see him every day. You know, you suffer because of him. You're being persecuted because of him. You know, you in debt because of him. You know, and you know, it's not to blame him totally, but you know, you got to do everything in moderation, man. You know, and be able to rightly live, man. Live righteously, man. You know, don't live above your means. Don't be greedy. You know, biting off more than you can chew, man. You got a mouthful, you end up spitting something out, wasting. Don't be a wasteful person. You know, don't be a gluttonous person, man. You know, this is where discipline come in at, man. Learn how to fast. Fast properly, man. Make a fast unto the Lord and pray, man. Pray without ceasing, man. You know, when you wake up, pray. You get ready to go somewhere, go out and about, pray. Before you read the scriptures, pray for discernment and understanding. King Solomon said this. He said, "In all thy getting, get understanding." And understanding is the process of standing under authority. Recognize what authority looks like. It might not be who you think it is, but if that person is speaking in wisdom and he's got intel, he's got information, be willing to accept that, because it may change the course of your life, right? There's power in the tongue, right? It's power of life, and there's power of death. You know, so can it's plain, man. But let me get back to this. Let me try to close this out. All right. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit. All right. So the laws weren't just moral, okay? They were economic resets that prevented generational bondage. You see? You know? So it says, in contrast, today's system perpetuates debt slavery, right? Perpetual is like an ongoing thing, you know? Perpetuates debt slavery, you know? Concentrates wealth, right? And mocks divine order. Whoo! You know, divine order, man. Divine order. It's the way things are done. And mockers and scoffers will have their part in the lake of fire, man. You know, in the lake of fire, right? The lake of fire, man. Hey, you know what a lake is? It's a sitting body. A sitting body. It's a body of water in one place. It's not a river. It's not a river. It's a lake. You know, a lake of fire, man. It's constant. You know, that's wherever that concentrated wealth is where the fire is. You see, perpetual debt slavery is a sin is something that's old, man. We have a debt, you know, to Yahweh. Why Yahweh Shai? Believe it or not, it's our reasonable service to present our bodies a living sacrifice. That means putting away the old man and putting on the new man, right? Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You know, you hear the term brainwash. You know, brainwash is in and of itself means to clean your mind, renew your mind. How do you wash your mind? You wash your mind with the spirit of prophecy, with the spirit of Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, his word. You know, his word comes through the mouth You know, his mouth is literally the men of the Lord. You know, the righteous one, speaking in truth and sincerity, man. You know, and you can tell when you hear it if it's genuine or not, because it comes from a genuine place or an ingenuine place. You understand? It says prophetic implications for today. It said he said he try to call me by my name, right? It says you side already live with vigilance and discernment. Clearly, right? You know, it says how, and it's not out of pride. You know, it's in humbleness. Call Allah Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, man. You know, vigilance and discernment, man, is very, very important. It's of great importance. You know, to know, you know, where I live, where I come from, who I am, who my people are, who our people are. You know, it's important to be vigilant and standing on this watch. You know, feed the sheep, as Yahweh Shai says. You know, the sheep, you know, he loved all of us. You know, I'm one of the sheep. You know, I'm not above reproach, correction. You know, rebuke. You know, that's why it's important for me to find a balance in this life, and not put myself before those of others, and to serve. Okay. You know, that is my ambition, my goal, right? So this is why I do these videos, like my fellow laborers in this truth. You know, shalom, shalom. All right. So it says expose. Here's how this ties into your calling: expose deception, teach others how digital finance may mask spiritual compromise. You see. You know, spiritual compromise is spiritual idolatry, spiritual fornication, right? Right? You know, for financial perks or gain, man. That money is not, and money is a defense, but it's not Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, man. You know, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, but render unto Yahweh why Yahweh Shai what is theirs. You know, that's our reasonable service, man. Doing this work, bringing out this truth, and you got to know the difference, man. You have to know the difference, man. You know, you got to learn how to be properly set apart. You know, for all things work for the good of those who love Yahweh by Hashem Yahweh Shai, man. All things work. You know, model self-sufficiency. All right, your gardening and practical wisdom embody Jubilee principles. All right. So yeah, you know, I went over a lesson about a week or two ago about gardening, like what you can grow, you know, at this time, you know. And gardening is also, you know, husbandry. Husbandry is the practice of cultivation. Cultivation is indeed an art given to us by Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, so that we can, you know, sustain our families, our communities, our brothers and sisters, our children, you know, because they are very important, man. You know, and of such belong the kingdom of heaven, man. They are the kingdom, man. You know, so gardening and husbandry is very important, right? Let the land rest, and you know, after a certain amount of years, right? You want to be able to balance that practice. All right. So it says create visual prophecy. All right. Depict the contrast between Babylon's system and Yahweh's economy. Truth versus control. Mercy versus manipulation. Okay. All right. So they can, you know, I'll sketch out like some images of things related to biblical prophecy, and you know, I draw lessons from those, or I should say I draw the lesson first and then have it, you know, give me a visual depiction of what was being stated, or within context of the message being brought out. All right, so you know, you always want to go with a balanced approach. A balanced approach is looking at a situation and being able to rightfully discern, okay, what is going to be the outcome, and if you can influence the outcome to be something that's positive, then that's the route you want to take. You want to have less collateral damage as possible, but not as far as Esau's concerned. We don't know. He's already, he's destroying himself. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, with Esau. The wicked, Babylon the Great, man. So it's fulfilling itself. So just know that if you go in wisdom and knowledge, and you benefit from the wisdom of the elders and apostles of Great Millstone and affiliate camps, those that share in the doctrine, and they may not be necessarily named GMS specifically or have the brand, but if they follow very closely, or if not exact, the doctrine of Great Millstone, which is the doctrine given by inspiration of the Holy Bible, then you're on the right course, man. You're on the right track. So with that being said, hopefully this is edifying, and to the next one, Shalom.